It's hard to believe that it's almost been 70 years since the king of the monsters, Godzilla, made his debut on the big screen. And over the years, fans have debated on which version of Godzilla has been the best. However, one point of contention over the years has been TriStar's infamously misguided version of Godzilla, which just so happens to be celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. I'm of course talking about Roland Emmerich's Godzilla. And over the past 25 years, the reaction to the film has been very mixed, with some saying it's the worst film of the franchise, whilst others suggesting that it's misunderstood. So which is it? Good or bad? Greetings all you movie junkies and entertainment lovers, and welcome to another review. Today we're going to be talking about Godzilla 1998. In 1992, TriStar announced plans to produce a trilogy of Godzilla films, and in July of 1994, Speed director Jan de Bont was hired to direct, but later left due to budgetary disputes with the studio. Then in 1996, Independence Day director Roland Emmerich was hired to direct and co-write the script with his producing partner Dean Devlin. The film was then released in May of 1998 to mostly negative reviews, but was able to be profitable at the box office. The film follows a team of experts as they investigate a vicious attack of a freighter in the Pacific Ocean. They conclude that an oversized reptile caused by nuclear testing is the culprit. The creature then travels to New York City, leaving a path of destruction in its wake. The city is evacuated before the US military, on Nick's advice, to lure the creature into revealing itself with a large pile of fish.
That's a lot of fish.
Their attempt to kill fails and only causes further damage before it escapes. Nick collects a blood sample and by performing a pregnancy test discovers the creature reproduces asexually and is collecting food for its offspring. Nick also meets up with his ex-girlfriend Audrey Timmons, who while visiting him uncovers a classified tape in his provisional detailing the monster's origins and turns it over to the media, in hopes of having her report put on television in an attempt to launch her career. Unfortunately, her boss Charles came and uses the tape in his report instead, declaring it is his discovery, and dubs the creature Godzilla.
It's Godzilla, you moron!
As a result, Nick gets removed from the operation altogether before being kidnapped by the mysterious Frenchman Philippe Roche.
You said this was French roast.
Ah oui, regardez, c'est marqué French roast.
More cream.
Revealing himself as an agent of the French Secret Service, Philippe explains that he and his colleagues have been closely watching the events to cover up their country's role in the nuclear testing that ultimately created Godzilla. Suspecting a nest is somewhere in the city, they cooperate with Nick to trace its location and destroy it. Nick and Philippe's team then find the nest hidden in Madison Square Garden with over 200 eggs. Before long, the eggs begin to hatch, causing a bigger problem for New York and possibly the world. Sounds like a fun monster movie, but not necessarily a good Godzilla movie, and in many ways that was the main problem. Roland Emmerich just wasn't trying to make a Godzilla film to begin with. One of the biggest issues that many have with this film is of course the design of Godzilla, which Emmerich decided to completely reinvent in an attempt to make Godzilla resemble more of a traditional dinosaur and not a man in a rubber suit. Emmerich also decided to abandon Godzilla's iconic atomic breath in favor of a, quote, power breath, where their Godzilla would simply blow objects away by exhaling a strong wind-like breath. They also decided to make their Godzilla act more like a real animal, with its first instinct to retreat when the military attacks, whereas the original Godzilla was portrayed as an unstoppable force of nature that only saw the military forces as a minor nuisance. I can appreciate that they tried to update Godzilla in a modern way, but unfortunately in doing so they ultimately created something that barely resembles what people recognize about Godzilla. Instead, this choice made the film feel more like an extended version of the end sequence in the Lost World Jurassic Park, and it has often been said that the film overall has a lot more in common with Jurassic Park than it does Godzilla, which is kind of ironic considering that Steven Spielberg said in multiple interviews that one of the biggest influences in making Jurassic Park, particularly The Lost World, were the original Godzilla films. With the Jurassic Park films being as successful as they were at the time, this was something that unfortunately was kind of inevitable. On practically all accounts, the conclusion here will be that this is a bad Godzilla film, but is it a bad movie? When I first saw this film as a kid, I had no prior experience with Godzilla. I had heard the name before, but I had no context as to where it came from. So when I first watched this, I just saw it as a completely original monster film. And as a lifelong monster movie fan, I absolutely loved it. When I later became more familiarized with the older Godzilla films, I soon started to discover how far removed this film was from the rest of the franchise. And my perception of it started to change. But it will always be the film that first introduced me to Godzilla, which is why I've always been very forgiving of the film, and I know a lot of other people have had the exact same experience as me. If you just forget that this film is called Godzilla and treat it as an average monster movie, it does work. Now, does that magically make it great and original? Of course not. But had it not been called Godzilla, it probably would have been seen as something derived from Godzilla rather than a terrible adaptation of Godzilla. It also probably wouldn't have made as much money as it did, but I imagine it would have at least gone to cult status by now. And you could even argue that in a very unconventional way, it kind of has. It's a very fine line when you're adapting something for a new generation. Normally the key to success is to find the balance between old and new. Take another film from 1998 for example, Gus Van Sant's ill-fated remake of Psycho. That film failed because it was a shot-for-shot remake of the original film, not introducing enough new elements to justify its existence. Godzilla 98 failed because it didn't retain enough elements of the previous Godzilla films to justify it being called Godzilla. It introduced new elements to Godzilla, but those elements were not necessarily original themselves. But just because it's derived from other films doesn't mean it's a complete write-off. After all, the original Star Wars was derived from the old Buck Rogers serials, but in that case it worked because it wasn't claiming to be Buck Rogers. Godzilla 98 claims to be Godzilla when at the end of the day it just isn't. So if you can forgive it for not being what it claims to be, you might find that this movie is actually not that bad after all. It's a decent monster movie, but not a good Godzilla movie.
You sure you didn't know about this?
No, no one told me anything about this.
Why do I even keep you around?
Thanks for watching this review. Be sure to subscribe for more videos, and until next time, be sure to consume as much entertainment as humanly possible, and I will see you in the next video.